family heartbreak as they await news about this latest breakthrough. We're going to speak with a grief counselor who herself lost a loved one in a plane disaster. She knows this grief all too well.
Nobody wants this answer more than the families of the 239 souls on board this flight. They are desperate, and understandably so. Our next guest knows their agony all too well. She lost her fiance on TWA Flight 800. Her name is Heidi Snow, and she joins us this morning from San Francisco. She is the founder of AirCraft Casualty Emotional Support Services. She's also the author of Surviving Sudden Loss, Stories from Those Who Have Lived It. Thank you for getting up early, Heidi. I know how close this is to your heart and obviously your work. You've been following this situation. If you can, put us inside the hearts and the heads of these family members who are waiting.
At this time, I remember early on in the first week or so, I would alternate between hope and reality. And we had said goodbye, and I could have never imagined that that would be the last opportunity to talk to him. And we'd expected a separation of just days at that point. And then suddenly the reality started to come into play that it could be forever. And that's when it began to become very difficult for me. But I really did hold on to hope until his remains were found. So even when the wreckage was found, I still really didn't believe he was gone until they actually found his remains. So there's a very difficult process, kind of going back and forth and clinging on to hope and thinking maybe he didn't board that plane. Maybe somehow he swam to safety. I used to think, gosh, he's strong. They said there were rescue boats out there early on in the first day, and I thought for sure he'd be on one of them. And then as time went on, I thought for sure, somehow he swam to shore, somehow he survived this. And I really held on to that to get through this. And now we're finding at Access, we're getting a lot of calls for help from other people who have been through this type of loss. And they're all reliving their losses, and we empathize with these families. And it's really brought us all back to day one. We've had even people from 9/11 who still today, their husbands went to work and they don't have their remains, and they're reliving it. And they've gathered the strength over time to become grief mentors and be there for other people in our organization. So they're really remarkable people who somehow have survived this and really are amazing role models for others having to go through this.
It's important perspective that this incident matters so much to these families specifically, but also people like you and people who have lost people from different types of disasters, whether they were related to aircraft or not. Now, you and I met back during this process as you were living it with Flight 800. How important for these families is information that's accurate, not dealing with these politics of what countries are revealing what versus hiding what? How much more difficult does that make this process?
It definitely makes it a lot more difficult, and I remember waiting for answers and trying to get confirmation, but at the end of the day, you really have to start to accept that that person may be gone, and that's what's really difficult. And all these other pieces will come into play over time. And I believe all the information is being relayed as quickly as it possibly can, but sometimes when you're actually in the position of looking for that information, it feels like somehow it may not be coming to you quick enough. But I really do believe the efforts are being made to let the families know what's happening.
I remember.
But obviously when you're on the other side, it's very difficult.
I can only imagine. And I remember you were such an advocate for urgency. Stay on it. People need to keep reporting about this. Don't let it fade when the next story comes up. And that becomes an interesting point, because the media is in a tricky position here, right? How much do you push and press for answers? How much do you do that? How much of that is helpful to the families? And what do you believe the lines are, if there are any, about what winds up starting to hurt the families?
I think just having them believe that they're being given information in a timely manner is very important. And then as time goes on, they're going to grieve in their own ways. Every person goes through it in their own way. But one of the things I found most important, as you remember too, because I talked to you about it as well, was really, just being able to talk about them, talk about the incident. And the hardest thing, I think, and most of our calls for help after large air disasters is really when the press steps away, the Family Assistance Center shuts down, and there's really no one out there acknowledging their loss anymore. And that's when our helpline heats up, and that's when people really start calling, because they have the acknowledgement begins to go away. They stop getting letters of people acknowledging that this happened to them. And so we've made sure that access is there for the long term. So when you're assigned a mentor, that person walks you through. It can be a few months, it can be a few years, that person is your go-to person. So you're never alone in this process.
The possibility,
it can be very isolating, and a lot of people don't understand it.
Well, it's so hard to understand. We just try to empathize and give these families what they need, what they ask for. And, as you remember so painfully well with your situation here, the scenario of possibility that maybe it landed somewhere, maybe they're alive, it's been such a part of the speculation that any type of discovery, while it seems to give closure, is also going to be painful to these families. That's why organizations like yours are so important. Heidi, you lived it personally, now you're trying to help others. It's beautiful work. Let us know how we can help you going forward if you get involved with these families. Heidi Snow, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate.
Thank you, Chris.